It's my pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker today, Jacqueline Vosell. Jacqueline is a nationally recognized women's life coach and motivational speaker who empowers women across the United States to live in victory. Jacqueline leads and motivates women on how to live their lives with passion and intentional purpose. She is a former MTV-made coach and serves on the board of directors of Women of Power Network. Jacqueline, welcome.
Hello, ladies and some gentlemen, some keynote gentlemen at each table. I am honored to be among so many amazing women in business, and I would personally like to thank the 8 incredible women that are being recognized here today. I want to thank you for your leadership in Connecticut as women. You are not only leaders in your industry, but you are an example to young women in business like myself and all the other women here. So we thank you. Thank you. When I was in high school, I remember I was in my mother's office and I was looking around and there were files filling the walls. There were tiles, there were fabric samples. I mean, it was just packed with hard work and all of this stuff that quite frankly gave me a headache. She used to have me file her files when I was in high school. I hated it. But I looked around and I was like, wow, there's so much in here. And it was really a big moment for me because when I was just a little girl, my father left us. And he didn't just leave my mother, my brother, and I, but he stripped our bank account and all of our savings. And so there we were, my mother, my brother, and I. And sometimes in life, we're in situations where we really don't want to be in them. And we always have a choice. And my mother made a choice to drive her situation, because she could have been driven into darkness, and she could have let the situation drive her, but she decided she was going to drive it. And so she started a business in our basement. And she started with nothing. And she worked, and she grew, and she struggled. And she grew some more, and she built more, and she connected more. And so 10 to 15 years later of growth and struggle and perseverance and faith and hard work, she won Interior Designer of the Year, and she got a trip to Italy, and she was featured in design magazines all over the country. And so when I was in high school and I was in my mom's office, which was still in our basement, she had like one of those 800 numbers that went downstairs to your basement to make it look like you had a big office somewhere. And so when I was looking around, all those files, all those samples, and all those tiles everywhere, it reminded me that I had a choice in my life to become the driver in my life, because that's what my mother did for not only herself, but for us. And so I went off to college. I became a Division I basketball player. I thought I was like the cool chick on the block, you know, I was the point guard, had a nice little jumper too. And I was playing basketball. Basketball was my life. It was something not only I was good at, but something I loved doing. I was that crazy girl that was outside when it was snowing and my mom would yell at me, "Get back in the house." And I'm like, just 5 more, just 5 more. And so I played basketball, and it was just my thing. Majored in psychology. I loved working with people, loved understanding people. And so when I graduated from Brown University, I went off to work at ESPN. And it was kind of something I just fell into because of being in the sports world. I kind of just fell into ESPN, and most people are like, what are you, crazy? You don't just fall into ESPN. But for me, I thought that's the only thing I'm good at, sports. That's all I have. And so at ESPN, doing my job, couple years in, I start doing sideline reporting for women's college basketball. I'm like, this is it. This is it. Here I am. And there was this one game in New Jersey. What a moment it was. If you watch sports, you know at halftime, the play-by-play announcer tosses it to the sideline reporter, and the sideline reporter is supposed to ask coach's question relevant to what is happening in the game. And so the producer gets in my ear, and he's like, Jacqueline, we're heading over to you in 3, 2, you're live. Thanks, Dan. Coach, your point guard had 22 points. Wow, she just lit it up in the first half. This was her career high in the first half. What got into her? And he answers the question, and I don't hear anything. I hear blah, 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 blah. And again, if you've watched any games, you know as a reporter, you're supposed to ask a follow-up question. And so as I'm hearing blah, 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 I'm thinking, what am I doing? I don't care how many points this girl scored. I mean, good for her, but it wasn't my passion. See, I liked playing basketball. Watching it was something I just fell into. I didn't care what you were going to do in the second half, no offense. And so when I came back to reality, I was like, oh crap, I have to ask a question. Thanks, Coach. Back to you, Dan. Yeah, I was mentally not there. And that for me was a big moment that only I knew about. How many of us have a GPS? Have you ever entered in the destination address? You press go, you start driving, it tells you to go left, tells you to go right, tells you to go 2 miles, take another left and another right and a right and a left and a left. And by the time you get there, you're like, where the heck am I? And you're like, and I know, lady, there was probably a shorter route. You took me over here and over there, and I went through like 10 towns just to get to the same town I started in. And that kind of made me think, what was driving me? Whose voice was I listening to? And how did I end up here at halftime asking this coach something I wasn't really passionate about? And why am I here? And so I started to realize that my entire life had been driven by external drivers. I was a perfectionist, and if you've ever studied perfectionism, it's just a form of insecurity. That's all it is. Because you don't want your flaws to be exposed. That's all it is. A form of insecurity. And so I was a perfectionist, and being a perfectionist got me from point A to point B, and when I was at point B to point C, I wanted to be affirmed by people. I wanted affirmation from my boss. You did great that game, reporting. And so from point B to point C to point C to point D, I had fear of failure. I don't want to fail. I graduated from an Ivy League. I played Division I basketball. I need to be great. And so from A to B to C to D, I finally reached E, which you can imagine was pretty empty. I was empty because I was being driven by external drivers. The need for affirmation stemming from when my father left when I was just a little girl. No, I didn't want affirmation from him, but because he never gave it to me, I felt the need to chase it everywhere I went. Perfectionism, to hide my insecurity. I wanted to be great at every little thing I did. And when we have these external drivers that run us, sometimes we get off track. And so I ask you to think about what is driving you. Are you in the driver's seat of your life? Or are you riding the passenger seat next to insecurity, fear of failure, perfectionism, or maybe you're trying to live up to somebody else's dreams that they had for you? What or who is driving you? And so what I did when I realized I was not in the place that I wanted to be, I decided I was going to just stop. and I needed to become the driver in my life. And so I did 4 things. The first thing I did was recognize. I had to recognize what was driving me. And once you recognize something, then you can move forward. And so I recognized that I was being driven by fear of failure. I was being driven by perfectionism. I was being driven by the need for affirmation. And so I had worked so hard to get to a place that I really didn't want to be. And so I had to recognize what was driving me. And the second thing, I had to remove that. I had to remove those things from the driver's seat in my life. And third, after you remove those things, reposition yourself. Get out of the passenger seat in your own life and get into the driver's seat. Now that doesn't mean fear won't try to creep in and ride shotgun. Doesn't mean insecurities not sit in the back seat. But what it means is they're not driving you. They're not your main drivers in your life. You have control. And when you are the driver in your life, you will start to see clear vision for the direction that you want to go. You'll begin driving with a purpose, your purpose. And the last part is, after you reposition yourself into your driver's seat, realign yourself. Realign yourself with your calling. Each one of us in this room has a calling over our lives, and we are each made uniquely. I can't stand up here and sing like those young women did so well. It's not my thing. So each of us have a purpose. And so when you get back into the driver's seat in your life, you start seeing that clear direction. And you start heading towards your dreams and achieving your goals and building that business in your basement. And you become the driver in your life. And as you drive and as you get more experience and as you grow, as you become like the 8 incredible women that are being honored here today, that's when you can pull your car over and say, "Fear, I'm gonna need you to get out of my car because I don't have any more room for you." Okay? My mentor is gonna sit right there. Thank you very much. And then you keep driving. And then you can stop again and tell insecurity in the back seat to get out because you don't have any room, because you're going to start being fearless. And so when we get back on track, we head towards our goals and our dreams and our purpose. And so I encourage you to be driven internally and not by external drivers, because we need you. We need every woman in this room to be the best woman that she can be to accomplish her goals and her dreams. And when you do get back in the driver's seat in your life, that's when you can begin to enjoy the drive of your life. Thank you.